The privilege and duties of patriotism. From an address before the Summer Light Guard, November 18th, 1862, by Thomas Starr King, out of the Book of Patriotism, part of the Young Folks Library, Volume 18. Thomas Starr King, American Unitarian clergyman, orator, and author, the son of a Universalist clergyman, was born at New York City, December 16, 1824, and died at San Francisco, March 4, 1864. He was ordained pastor of the Hollis Street Unitarian Church in Boston, where he remained 11 years. In 1860, he accepted a call to a Unitarian church in San Francisco, where he met with much success. He was the author of The White Hills, Their Legends, Landscape, and Poetry in 1859, Patriotism and Other Papers, 1865, Christianity and Humanity, 1877, and Substance and Show and Other Lectures, 1877. I am to speak to you of the privilege and duties of American patriotism. First, the privilege. Patriotism is love of country. It is a privilege that we are capable of such a sentiment. Self-love is the freezing point in the temperature of our world. And as the heart is kindled and ennobled, it pours out feeling and interest, first upon family and kindred, then upon country, then upon humanity. The home, the flag, the cross. These are the representatives or symbols of the noblest and most sacred affections or treasures of feeling in human nature. We sometimes read arguments by very strict moralists which cast a little suspicion upon the value of patriotism as a virtue, for the reason that the law of love, unrestricted love, should be our guide and inspiration. We must be cosmopolitan by our sympathy, they prefer to say. Patriotism, if it interferes with the wider spirit of humanity, is sectionalism of the heart. We must not give up to country what is meant for mankind. Such sentiments may be uttered in the interest of the Christian philanthropy, but they are not healthy. The divine method in evoking our noblest affections is always from particulars to generals. God hath set the celerity in families, and bound the families into communities, and organized communities into nations. And he has ordained special duties for each of these relationships, and inspired affections to prompt the discharge of them, and to exalt the character. The law of love is the principle of the spiritual universe, just as gravitation is the governing force of space. It binds each particle of matter to every other particle, but it attracts inversely as the square of the distance, and thus becomes practically a series of local or special forces, holding our feet perpetually to one globe and allowing only a general unity, which the mind appropriates through science and meditation with the kindred but far-off spheres. The man that has most of the sentiment of love will have the most intense special affections. You cannot love the whole world and nobody in particular. If you try that, it will be true of you, as of the miser who said, "What I give is nothing to nobody." However deep his baptism in general goodwill, a man must look with a thrill that nothing else can awaken into the face of the mother that bore him. He cannot cast off the ties that bind him to filial responsibilities and a brother's devotion. And Providence has ordained that out of identity of race, a common history, the same scenery, literature, laws, and aims, though in perfect harmony with goodwill to all men, the wider family feeling, the distinctive virtue, patriotism, should spring. If the ancient Roman could believe that the yellow Tiber was the river dearest to heaven, if the Englishman can see a grandeur in the Thames which its size will not suggest, if the alpine storm wind is a welcome home song to the Swiss mountaineer, if the Laplander believes that his country is the best the sun shines upon, if the sight of one's own national flag in other lands will at once awaken feelings that speed the blood and melt the eyes, if the poorest man will sometimes cherish a proud conscience of property in the great deeds that glow upon his country's annals and the monuments of its power, let us confess that the heart of man, made for the Christian law, was made also to contract a special friendship for its native soil, its kindred stock, its ancestral traditions. Let us not fail to see that where the sentiment of patriotism is not deep, a sacred affection is absent. An essential element of virtue is wanting, and religion barren of one prominent witness of its sway. But why argue in favor of patriotism as a lofty virtue? History refuses to countenance the analytic ethics of spiritual dreamers. It pushes into notice Leonidas, Tell, Cincinnatus, Camillus, Hampton, Winkelried, Scipio, Lafayette, Adams, Bolivar, and Washington, in whom the sentiment has become flesh and gathered to itself the world's affections and honors. It asks us, what do you say of these men? These are among the brighter jewels of my kingdom. Thousands of millions fade away into the night in my realm. But these souls shine as stars with pure lustre as they retreat into the blue of time. Is not their line of greatness as legitimate as that of poets, philosophers, philanthropists, and priests? Nay, the Bible is opened for us to stimulate and increase our love of country. Patriotism is sanctioned and commended, and illustrated there by thrilling examples. By the great patriot prophet Moses, who during all those wilderness years bore the Hebrew people in his heart. By Joshua, who sharpened his sword on the tables of stone till its edge was keen as the righteous wrath of heaven, and its flame fierce as a flash from Sinai, as it opened a path through an idolatrous land for the colonization of a worthier race and a clean idea. Oh, that there were enough of that steel in America today to make a sword for the leader of the Union armies. By the great statesman Samuel, to whom every Jew may point with pride as the Hebrew Washington. By David, who for the glory of his nation wielded the hero's sword and tuned the poet's harp. By the long line of their fire-tongued prophets, whose hearts burned for their country's redemption while they proclaimed the higher law. By the lyric singers of the exile, like him who chanted the lament which seems to gush from the very heart of patriotism. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. Let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth, if I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy.